If you enjoyed thoughts around cloning, lollipopping, defanning, and defoliating, well, you might want to stick around. You're here with Mark Bowell at perfectgardens.com. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. We got our $2.99 membership, and we have a VIP if you need a little more one-on-one. Link down in the description. First, HNG with Smoky Lot. I appreciate you posting and commenting here. I first have to say, if someone doesn't understand what I'm trying to say, it is not shame on you for not understanding what I'm trying to say. It is shame on me for not putting into the right words. All right, let's go ahead and get into your comment. I was told by a plant biologist and longtime grower, when cloning, if you clip the tips, it will promote more root growth. Removing the bottom 1/3 overall is not pruning. It is called lollipopping. And to not do it past day 21 to flowering because it's too stressful on the plants. So to just be open with everyone on the channel, I never read the Grow Bible. I never read or watched YouTube videos about how to grow these plants. All of my growing experience is by putting my own money in the line and doing it, and scaling up really quickly, and over a course of a decade still staying alive in the industry. So just to be really clear, there's a lot of terminology and words that I probably should know just because I've been in this game for so long, but I don't know because I might call it different or might be just describing it a certain way. Because guys, you guys have to remember, man, this has been in the black market. Though my entire life being in part of this industry, we were heavily in the black market. Before this, I was part of the military of the 212th Pararescue, so all of that lifestyle was just extreme secrecy. So I never really talked to anyone outside of my grow clients, and I never did like a let's get together, do a kumbaya, have a barbecue with all my grow clients. It was a very intense, now over a decade of my life of survival. So once again, I apologize on the terminology. I might be using words wrong or describing things or saying things, but it's just because I'm describing it from my own life experience the best way I know how. And I have autism too, so there are definitely some hiccups you guys are having to deal with on this channel. So let's just be real clear. And I'm going to break this down step by step. I actually really took some time to think about some terminology. I'm going to do my best to actually stick to this terminology on this channel from my own life experience. Because like I said, I never read the Grow Bible or all these other types of books. Although I did go meet Ed Rosenthal. I did have a great dinner with him, went to his house, had a very intimate experience with him over a week's time. So for me, I got the opportunity to go out and actually meet people that wrote these books or did these things, and I was behind the veil in a sense. You know, I was not like there having to keep posture and act a certain way in their ego. I got the opportunity kind of to go in the back scenes and actually witness things that most people don't witness, especially the end consumers, because these people obviously they have their private life. And so I'm not talking specifically about Ed. I'm just saying that I got these opportunities to meet a variety of expert growers or people that were writing books in the industry, and I wasn't thoroughly impressed by them, to be very open with you. When I sat down and actually had a one-on-one conversation with them, I realized I was dealing with people that were riddled with a lifetime of abuse of drugs. Just to be really clear with you, I mean, you know, an adult human being that never did drugs. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with drugs. I'm just saying that sometimes when people heavily abuse themselves through addiction patterns, even if they're very successful, a lot of very successful people, very intelligent people have addiction issues. You could tell that sometimes it messes people up a little bit. And so when I was getting real life experiences, and then obviously they wrote a book, right? And I'm going over a medium, but I'm not thoroughly impressed because of the dialogue we're having. I had to really go back and ask myself, do I want to take this person's advice? Yeah, he might be successful, but we can't really hold down a basic conversation. You know, the person's kind of all over the place. I'm not talking about autistic all over the place, because that's definitely me. I'm talking about brain cells being lost over a lifetime of abuse issues. And obviously I have to give recognition for these people because is they laid a lot of groundwork. They got a lot of arrows in the back. They spent probably a lot of money on lawyers and all these other things. And their growing environments were probably much more intense than mine, in the fact that if they got caught, possibly they'd be spending a decade of their life in jail. So I'm definitely respecting them for what they did. I'm just saying that when your own money is on the line, you have to make a decision. Do you follow someone else's opinion and guidance that you're not thoroughly impressed by? Or do you take your own life experiences, your own network of people, and put something together and go through your own learning curve? Sometimes it doesn't work out. In our case, it did work out for quite some time. Obviously, I'm still here talking to you guys, right? So let's go ahead and get into this. When someone says that they clip the leaves to promote root growth, I have to run this through my own life experience. And I have to say, at the end of the day, I disagree with this, because the leaves produce photosynthesis. And I do agree that you shouldn't have too many leaves on there, because that is going to require more water, more uptake of stuff. And I can definitely see that being an issue. Again, these were my own thought processes of why aren't I getting clones? So why is it taking 10 days to root out versus 7 days? And then when I'm getting some clones that are in 6 days and I'm able to transplant and everything's looking good while other plants are taking 2 weeks or whatever, I have to build in my own psychological thought process around this. I have to really think about why, because if I know that if I'm able to increase this a week, I'm able to get more plugs off, more plants are going to be able to get produced, more ROI at the end of the day. So this was always my thought process, and I was always taking track of every single thing. And when you're producing thousands and thousands of plants, it's easier to kind of get a percentage. When you're only dealing with a few plants, it's harder to kind of figure it out because you're only doing a couple plants at a time. But when you're dealing with thousands of plants and they're all the same strain, or you're only dealing with 2 or 3 strains, you really do create a rhythm with these plants. In a sense, it's kind of like your wife, right? Or your long-term girlfriend or partner. So for me, I had to really ask myself, do plants recover from stress with 1 cut or 5 cuts? And what I mean by that is when I clip the clone off the main mother plant or whatever plant I'm getting it from, and if I took it and clipped all those leaves, now the plant is been cut 5 times. Once from the mother, and then let's say you have 3 leaves. Each of those leaves are going to have 5 to 7 leaves on them. So that's actually 15 to 21, totaling 22 cuts. It could be between 16 and 22 cuts depending upon that whole thing. So I have to ask myself, like, wow, that's pretty painful, right? Go get a little razor blade and cut yourself 17, 18, up to 21 times. Every cut, your body has to recover from that stress. So for me, even when I really just think about it, right, when I was putting each of these clones into the plugs and I was clipping them, I take responsibility for it. So maybe I was overstuffing the clones and I was trying to put 50 clones in, and I did that, right? And I didn't like the results I was getting by clipping the leaves. And so what did I end up doing? I ended up going to about 30 clones under each dome, not clipping the leaves, because the thought of extra stress did not make sense to me as the grower. And since I was putting my own money on the line and my own risk, safety, family, all of it, when I thought about it, the clipping of the leaves just didn't make any sense to me. Also, the plant needs roots to store its nutrients. So why would I want to remove the solar panels and cut them in half, reduce that process, when at the end of the day, I'm running my lights for 24 hours a day until those roots develop? Because without those roots being able to store nutrients, and if I shut off those lights for 6 hours, which again, a lot of people do it, you're still going to get roots. For me though, I went through that psychological thought process of saying, you know what, that it doesn't make sense, because the leaves need light, and through that light, it is forcing the plant to produce roots. And I kind of went with that in my own thought process. Then if I would have read one of these grow Bibles and actually read about how to clone, I might have stuck to that thought process of what they suggested. Although none of these guys ever grew to the size we grew to. So, you know. Second one is cleaning the bottom 1/3. They call that lollipopping. Not going to disagree with you, but all they're doing right here is just describing what the plant looks like after they do what they do. For me, I apologize, I didn't know what that word was. For a number of years, I'd hear it a couple times, but for me, I would watch the plant and I would watch that when the leaves were touching the soil, those leaves were more riddled with issues or mold or something was happening, right, with the leaves that were closer to the pot. And so for me and my father obviously looking at the plants, we obviously having a couple decades of growing experience, I went through the process, and we went through the process of just thinking, hey, it's probably not good. And if we're dealing with indoor plants and not a lot of air circulation, it would probably be more beneficial to the plants if we remove some of the foliage. And for us and for what we were doing, we actually did this during our transition week. We would actually even prep our plants all at once. So when we were cloning, we were also at the same time cleaning up the bottom 1/3 of those plants. Because in Big Ag, one of the awarenesses my parents had was that every single time you touch the product, you're slowing down the process. And let's say the lettuce, for example, when they were harvesting, well, if one guy cut the head of lettuce and then handed it to another guy to remove the core, now we have that whole process. But if that one guy just cut the head of lettuce and was able to remove it right there in that spot, it speeds up production. Same thing here. If you're going back through and I know you're not saying to go back and clean it up throughout the first couple weeks of flowering, but that plant is getting bigger. You're dealing with more biomass no matter what. And so through that whole process, through week 1, 2, and 3, until you stop cleaning up the bottom 1/3, that plant has put a lot of energy into all those leaves and all of those offshoot of branches that you end up removing. So again, for me and for us, we did this much earlier on and didn't do this into flowering because for us in our cycle and our thought process, it just didn't make any sense. So there's parts that I, as a grower, naturally gravitated to, which a lot of growers obviously wrote books about these different techniques we gravitated to. And I personally wouldn't recommend to do this 3 weeks into flowering. I wouldn't recommend to do it way earlier on. So this is where we're differing because I had my own real life experience. I never read these books. Third, deleafing and defanning. I would meet a lot of growers that were already growing for a number of years. There's sometimes growers that don't want to listen. They don't want to switch out ideas. So I would just shut my mouth. I'd go into the grow room, check out their plants, be like, okay, that's super cool. They'd tell me whatever they're doing. I'd be like, oh, okay, that's cool. So I would have these comparisons, being able to see our plants versus their plants without any influence. And in this situation, they would call this defanning or deleafing, to let the light penetrate and get deeper in the plant. That's would be what the classic things all these guys would say. I do not agree with this whatsoever. Totally disagree with this because once again, you're removing foliage in the middle of flowering. It kind of goes back to 1 cut versus 5 cuts. For me, I would actually just let the leaves die all the way back to brown and shrivel up right there on the plant. Why? It's because there's a lot of mobile nutrients in that leaf, and the plant will rob it from that one leaf all the way to the point where it dries. It'll even rob the water out of that leaf until the point it just falls off on its own. So why am I removing any of the foliage whatsoever when the plant can use it? Of course, I would remove leaves if there was a pest problem or something like that, but I don't believe in any level in removing leaves whatsoever throughout the flowering process. Then last but not least is the fourth terminology I've heard people use is defoliating pre-harvest to help with the trim or pest control. I do agree slightly with the pest control, but I've evolved this thought process to more using it as a wash. I actually like to if I have aphid problems, spider mite problems, powdery mildew, any of those things, I actually will just do a quick wash on the plant. If I'm dealing with large crops, I will get a large trash can. I will get whatever size container I need for the operation I'm dealing with. I would treat that water with hydrogen peroxide, pH set it. I'd put 1 ml drops of balance in it. I'd get my whole stem, my plant, and I'd dunk it in there. Again, that's only if I'm dealing with bug problems. And then I would immediately go to my drying and curing process. And if you guys don't understand why I would do that, and if you would think, oh man, that's crazy. Why would I put all that water on my flowers? Well, it's because I'm not worried about it, because the water at that point, we're going to be going right into curing. Then there's going to be no time for powdery mildew or botrytis or anything to get worse or start, because right there, the water I'm putting in has hydrogen peroxide, has drops of balance in there. And once again, I am making my product that might be not consumable. After I wash it, it becomes consumable again and healthy and in line with my values. Once again, also, I like to cure with all my foliage. Why is that? It's because I've identified that foliage should act as a cocoon and actually protect the flower over a course of roughly 150 to 175 tests, actually paying the money anywhere from $60 up to $120 per per test to actually check the concentration and the terpene profiles of these plants, I've identified that leaving my foliage on for the entire curing process and storage process actually keeps the integrity of the plant together and keeps more of those essential oils on the plant until it's ready to go to the end consumer. Again, guys, I didn't read all these books that are out there in the industry. I put my own money on the line and I risked it. I risked my freedom. I risked my family's safety. And after meeting the so-called experts of the industry, and we're talking about 13 years ago at this point, I wasn't impressed by them. And I wasn't going to put my life, my family's life, our resources on the line, following suggestions by people that weren't totally in line with my values and or I wasn't totally impressed by. I hope this video was helpful. Please give me a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Stress will make your plants produce more oil production. You see this a lot if you bring your LED lights too close to your plants, right? You get frost tips or white tips, right? That's all because of stress.